Welcome to the Encrypted in Grey podcast. If you're drawn to the messy, murky and mysterious corners of life, Encrypted in Grey is your next listen. This podcast fearlessly dives into the grey areas where truth blurs, beliefs clash, and clarity is often elusive. From moral dilemmas and fringe science to taboo topics and personal paradoxes, each episode unpacks the complexities we often shy away from. With thought-provoking discussions, real stories, and a dash of wit, Encrypted in Grey invites you to explore what lies between black and white, and maybe even change how you see the world.
Hi, I'm Ciara. Welcome to the Encrypted in Grey. After 5 years as a stay-at-home mother, I found myself reflecting, not just on where I've been, but on the strange experiences that have followed me since childhood. Experiences I never asked for. Experiences I still can't explain. This podcast is my way of asking the questions out loud, because I have something to say, and maybe you're ready to listen. I grew up in Staten Island, New York, in a home where my parents were careful about what I was exposed to. UFOs, aliens, the paranormal, that wasn't part of my world, yet. I didn't watch movies about it. I didn't read books about it. I didn't even know what those things were. But somehow, as a child, I began having vivid dreams of being inside a spacecraft. Not a plane, not a rocket, not anything I'd ever seen before. It was unfamiliar, almost impossible to describe. And I had no idea where these images came from. After those dreams, I'd often wake up in the middle of the night with nosebleeds, repeatedly. I thought it was normal, something that just happened to kids. But then I started noticing strange marks on my body. Odd shapes, patterns. At the time, I didn't know what they were. But now, I've learned they're called scoop marks, and they're often reported by people who have experiences like mine. I saw doctors, I asked questions, but there were no answers, just more questions. Fast forward a few years, I was about 11 or 12. One night, I woke up to a blinding light shining through my bedroom window. I assumed it was a car, maybe the neighbor's headlights, but the light didn't fade. It grew stronger and brighter. Too bright to be headlights. And then came the fear. Not just nervousness, but a deep primal fear that told me something was wrong. I wanted to get up, I wanted to call for my mom, but I couldn't move. Not because I was paralyzed, but because I was terrified. In the corner of my room where the light was shining, I saw a black mist. It grew thicker and stronger, and then I heard it. Shuffling sounds like paper rustling right next to my ear. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, looked around. Nothing. No rat, no source, just the sound, just the mist. I didn't see an alien, I didn't see a ghost, but I felt something. Something I couldn't explain. Something that told me I was in danger. I cried, I prayed, I begged for safety, and eventually I passed out from fear. I told my parents the next day. They said it sounded like sleep paralysis. But I wasn't paralyzed. I could move. I could look around. I could grab my phone. That's not sleep paralysis. So what was it? Was it connected to the dreams, the scoop marks, the nosebleeds? Was it all just a coincidence? Or was it something more? I don't have the answers, but I do have questions. And that's why I created Encrypted in Grey, to explore the unexplained. To give voice to the stories that don't fit neatly into science or belief. To ask, is there more to this world than what we can see? I've spent years trying to make sense of the moments, trying to find language for the things that defy explanation. But I've learned something along the way. I'm not the only one. These stories, these questions, these strange encounters, they echo in other lives too. That's why I'm not doing this alone. So I would like to introduce you to Anna and Matt, my co-hosts. Two people whose experiences are different from mine, but just as haunting, just as real, just as unresolved.
Hi, my name is Anna. My friends and family call me Donchi. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself and fill you in on a story that happened to me when I was about 8 or 9 years old. First of all, I am a mother of 2. I'm recently married to Matthew McEwen. I am a nurse. I've been a nurse for over 13 years in different fields. And I am a very family-based person. I am very spiritual, but do not belong to any denomination. I just felt like I'll throw that little disclaimer in. And what has brought me to this point and to be part of Encrypted in Gray is because I saw a UFO when I was about 8 or 9 years old. I was playing in the front yard of my aunt's house. This was probably 88, 89. She lived in West Jordan, Utah, till this day, the same house. And it was probably about 6 or 7 o'clock at night in late July. I was playing tag with a couple of my cousins and some friends from the neighborhood. And as we were playing, I happened to look up in the sky above West Jordan High School. And I would gauge maybe 200 feet above the high school. I saw pretty detailed round, and it was like a dark metallic craft, and it was perfectly round, and it did have indentations in the middle where it looked like square windows, and it was angled, and it flew into the cloud bank. And as it flew into the cloud bank, it released like these lights from the bottom, which was blue. I remember the color blue, like an orangey color, yellow, and then green. The green was like a soft neon green. Can't articulate the exact color exactly, but it was like a greenish light, and it went into the cloud bank. And as I looked at that, I knew I was not looking at a plane. I knew it was not a helicopter. Back then in the late 80s, that drones weren't even a thing, that wasn't even a thought. It made no noise. There was no noise to it at all. Not a hum, not a whoosh, nothing. It was silent. But the feeling that I got looking at it, it just made every hair on my body just stand. And I did feel this, it was kind of like an electrical feeling throughout my body. And I let out a scream, and I was freaking out. When the adults came out, which was my aunt, my grandma, my mom came to see what was going on. And the other kids, they thought I got stung by a bee or something. And I had said, look, I remember pointing up and said, look. And by the time the other kids looked up, only one of them saw the green light come out through the cloud bank. And they said, yeah, I see that green. Well, the adults immediately were like, what did you see? And I was explaining, I saw this round thing, and it let out these lights. It wasn't a helicopter. And I was told by, several people, that's not what you saw. You probably saw a helicopter. I'm like, it wasn't. There was no noise. No, well, maybe you were looking at the Kennecott lights. And I was old enough to know that it was not the Kennecott lights. And I would say it's not that, because the Kennecott lights are that way. And I would point towards the Kennecott lights, on the Ochre Mountains. That's not what I saw. You can see the lights from here. That's not what I saw. It was in July. So then, my family members would be like, oh, it's probably fireworks. You probably just saw some fireworks. And I would just cry and be like, it was not fireworks. You guys, please, somebody believe me. It wasn't a plane. It wasn't a helicopter. I know what I saw. And the only one who would believe me was my grandmother. And my grandmother, her name was Marina. And she was born in Arecibo, Puerto Rico. And she gave me a hug, and she consoled me. And she said, maybe people don't believe you, but I believe you. And that's all that matters. I believe you. She said I was just pale white, like I saw a ghost. Did not see a ghost. I saw a UFO. And she did tell me later that evening, because I was so scared, I had to sleep with her, that when she was a child growing up in Puerto Rico, that they would see these lights come out of the ocean, and they would do, she said, like a light show, and then these lights would go back into the ocean. And she said, I believe you because I saw something similar, growing up. And so that happened to me, and that put me on the path of questioning everything, down to religion. I question everything. I look into things. I research, and I'm searching for the truth. And I've learned through my journey that there's a lot of truth hidden in lies. There's a lot of things out there that is surrounded by exaggeration, but if you look hard enough, you can find hints of truth in a lot of stories. I know my truth, and that happened to me, and I know what I saw. An unidentified aerial phenomenon, I guess. But that is what Encrypted in Gray is about, is questioning those truths, listening to people's story without, immediately with a doubtful mind. Because sometimes there's truth in the strange.
I'm Matt, and this is kind of a little introduction to let you know about me and kind of what my background is. I'm married to Anna. We got married in June of 2025. We've known each other about 9 years. I have 3 kids from a previous marriage, and my work background, I guess, has been mostly in like homeowner claims and insurance. I did homeowners claims. I did worked as a project manager and estimator for some restoration companies, and now I do kind of like a specialty homeowner claims. In college, I studied political science with a minor in history, and then I went on to get a master's degree in public administration, which I guess I haven't really done much with. I did work for the state of Utah, at the time, so it kind of made sense then. But anyways, I was raised in a pretty high demand religion and lived active in my religion for a good part of my adult life until about 10 years ago. My views on things just kind of changed over time, and got to a point where my spiritual beliefs evolved, I guess. I remember one day, kind of after going through that process of change, I was kind of laying on my bed thinking about things. I sat up and just kind of thought, you know what, I don't believe in this religion anymore. And I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I didn't even realize was there. So I don't really identify with any organized religion. And I knew I wasn't an atheist. I've always kind of believed there is something more. There's some kind of a higher power or consciousness out there that we're all part of. So I'm kind of fall under that label, spiritual, not religious. Growing up, I think being religious, it seemed to me you would be open-minded to, the paranormal and the supernatural, those types of things. So I always kind of had an interest in that. I think when I was younger, my dad was a truck driver, and he would drive and, listen to Art Bell coast to coast, at night while he was driving. And then he would tell me about things he listened to. And, occasionally I would go out on the road with him and, listen to that with him. I did have a couple of my own experiences as an adult. The first one of these was probably in mid 2000s. We had a house that we had bought, me and my ex-wife, and it was a new house. It didn't have any kind of history behind it, but I did see something in the house one night. I was, one of my daughters was probably 3 or 4 at the time. I heard her get up in the middle of the night, to go to the bathroom. So I just thought, well, I'll kind of go make sure she gets back in bed okay. I was out in the hall. It was dark, and my 2 daughters shared a room, and I thought the other daughter came out of the room, walked past me right into the bathroom, and I thought, oh, great, they're going to start arguing or whatever, but I didn't hear anything, and I kind of was thinking about, okay, what did I just see? I thought it was my daughter, but she looked like she had like a long white nightgown on, and I knew my daughter didn't really have, pajamas like that, and the hair was longer than my daughter's hair, and I thought, all right, well, I'll just go look in the room. They had a bunk bed in there. I thought if she's in there asleep, I'm going to be freaked out, but I thought she would be in there or wouldn't be in there asleep because I just saw somebody walk past me, a child, into the bathroom. But I went into the bedroom and she was up there in the top bunk fast asleep. And I was like, okay, what did I just see? So another time, this was the first week of May 2017. Anna was actually with me, although she didn't see it. But we were in Salt Lake City, kind of up on the east benches, driving west, and kind of coming down off the benches on, I think it was 90th South, looking out towards the west and the over the Ochre Mountains. And it was, early summer. It was still light outside. I want to say it was like 9 o'clock at night. And there's a bright star in the sky at that time, the western sky. I think it's Venus. But anyways, I'm not too much of an astronomer, but I looked out and I saw what I thought were two stars sitting there, perfectly still. And for some reason, it caught my attention. I was just looking at both the stars, standing there completely still, and then all of a sudden one of them started moving downward, and I was like, okay. And I thought, well, it's not a meteor because it wasn't like shooting through the sky and falling. I saw it standing there perfectly still, and I thought it would fall it was going at a little bit of an angle as it went down, and I thought I would just lose sight of it behind the mountain, but that didn't happen. Before it got to the mountain, it curved and then looked like it was going more to the north and away from me. And then there were some trees on the north side of the road, and as it kind of curved that way, I lost sight of it behind the trees. But I knew that I had seen something unusual. It looked like a star. It was bright, same appearance. But once it started moving, I realized, oh, that's not a star out in the sky. That's something in our atmosphere that looked like a star. So that was a pretty unusual experience. And then me and Anna have done things together and had a few different experiences that maybe we'll talk about. But I think that's pretty much it for now. And we look forward to just kind of having these conversations, and hopefully what we say helps people, who have had their own experiences, kind of maybe come to terms with that, or open their mind to, what the possibilities are of, what they may have experienced. And we also hope that we'll be able to hear, some of your stories as well. So thanks.
If today's exploration left you stirred, unsettled, or simply thinking deeper, that's the point. Keep challenging, keep questioning. Meet me back in the grey, where the conversation never ends.